Hello viewers, today I have a 2006 Mazda 3 with the 2.3 liter engine, and today I'm going to be replacing the driver's side lower control arm. Welcome back to the Moose Mobile Auto Repair channel. And so today we are going to be doing the driver's side. I have a previous video in which I did the passenger side. So I'm going to put the link on the screen here for you guys to watch if you're interested. And I'll also post it in the description and in the comments section below. So the first thing you want to do is to remove the nut on the pinch bolt. This one is a 14. I'm not sure if the size is going to be different or the same for the OEM. I think it was a 13 if I'm not mistaken. So the pinch bolts are going to be different if you're using aftermarket parts. This one is a 14, so we're going to loosen up the nut. Now, in some cases, if you're not able to loosen up the nut or the pinch bolt, then you will need to heat it up. So the other end of the pinch bolt is also a 14, so you can use a wrench or put a socket on it to hold it in place. So I just like to leave the nut on the end here, and I'm just going to use a hammer to top it out. Now, in some cases, you may need to use like a drift, a chisel, or something to knock it out. But in this case, this came out easy because it's been serviced some years ago, and so it's easy to remove the pinch bolt if it's not seized inside the knuckle. So I'm just going to remove the bolt. You can take it out by hand if you're able to. Now, typically these pinch bolts are not reusable, but I've seen guys reuse this and there's no issues. But you're typically are not supposed to reuse them, so you should always use a brand new one. And usually, if you have an aftermarket control arms, they normally will come with the pinch bolt and the nut. Just make sure that you note the orientation as to how the bolt came out. So the bolt was facing towards the rear of the vehicle. So make sure you put the bolt in the same way when you install the new control arm. So usually you can hammer down on the control arm to get it out, and use a pry bar at the same time. This one is going to be easy because they've been replaced roughly 7 years ago or so. So it's been routinely serviced. So it should be easy to get the ball joint stud out. I'm just going to use a pry bar to push it down. You should be able to come out easily. It's already loose now. In some cases, you can use an air hammer to push down here, or to hammer on the edge of the control arm. Some guys like to use a pickle fork or something. So there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of a preference. And so you can use a hammer or an air hammer or anything to knock these ball joints out. This is not on what typically happens when you remove ball joints. A lot of times you have to hammer them down. So it depends on what you want to do. And sometimes if it's like stuck, sometimes I remove the control arm bolts where the subframe is. I remove those sometimes first, and then I let the arm hang down, and I'll be able to hammer down on the arm to get the ball joint stud out. That's easier for me in some cases. So I'm going to start with the rear two bolts. They are 17 millimeters each. Here are the bolts. You can clean these down if you want to clean the rust off. They have been recently greased up. So now I have a 19 deep socket with the U joint. This on this side I have good access. On the passenger side it's a different story. I should be able to get that completely out. If it's not seized in there. So now the control arm is ready to come out. You can use a hammer to push down if you need to. Just gonna get this guy out. Push down on the pry bar. This is what I was saying earlier. I like to get the control arm down, and I can just hammer it down like this, and then you should be able to get the stud out. So just give it a few taps, and you're all good. So now I'm just comparing the new one and the old one. This is a Moog part for the new one, RK620041. These ones are the non-greasable ones. Some people have complained about there is not enough grease inside here or something, so I'm not sure. So I'm just going to leave that alone, just install them onto the vehicle. Install this onto the vehicle. This it comes with in a box like this, and it comes with a new pinch bolt and nut. And it just tells you some information here, some warning on the bag. This one is a new pinch bolt and nuts, so we are going to be using this. So what I like to do, I like to use the Lucas, the red grease stuff, and I like to put some grease inside the sleeve of the bushing, and then I'm going to grease the bolts afterwards because Uh, I don't want the bolts to seize up, and you won't have any issues. I'm using the Lucas, the red and tacky grease. So now I'm just going to install a control arm and line this up. So what you want to do is to get this straight, to line it up. You don't want to install the stud, ball joint stud, into the steering knuckle yet. So just try to line this up and get it straight. You may need to move or to shift the steering knuckle a tiny bit. Sometimes you can add some weight onto here. You can place a jack or something to put a little bit of pressure over here so you can get this straight, so you're able to get the bolts in. Usually I like to use the deep socket to turn the bolts and try to get it in. You just need to be careful to not push too much on the steering knuckle, because then you're going to pop the inboard joint of the axle. So you want to be careful. In some cases, you may need to tap lightly here to bring it in, and sometimes you can use like a chisel or a screwdriver to line up the holes and see on where it is, and that's also helpful too. But me, I just go by feel, and then that's good. So what I'm doing here at the moment is that I'm having some trouble trying to line up the bolts. So I use a bottle jack just to raise the bushing up to keep it straight. And so I'm using a block of wood and a bottle jack. Just make sure you don't use those cheap bottle jacks that are made in China. This one is made in Japan. The ones made in China, they often don't work all that well. Like, they'll probably work for a few times, and sometimes they'll leak or just stop working. So I use a Japanese bottle jack, and I haven't had any issues with those. So I'm just trying to get this straight. So I'm using a block of wood just to put it on the bushing so I can try to get the bolt in there. So I'm trying to do it by hand first because I don't want to cross thread anything. So now that bolt is through for pretty much for for most of the way. Now I just have to do the other one. So I'm going to see if I'm able to get the other bolt in. I might have to lower the bottle jack if possible, or if needed. I mean, this is going in now, so everything seems to be okay. I often usually have a lot of trouble with the two rear bolts on the Mazda vehicles, but because I've gained experience over the years, I have figured out multiple solutions to get these in. Now, earlier when I did the passenger side, I did not have to do this. So the passenger side, believe it or not, it was a lot easier for me to do compared to this side, even though that the AC compressor is a little bit in the way for the passenger side. This side is supposed to be easier because you don't need to raise the engine or remove any extra things. So this one's going in now. So I'm having a look on the subframe. You can see the rear bolt has started to go through now. So everything is all good. And the one in the front too. These bolts, I have to admit, they can be fairly tricky sometimes. So you really have to be careful and patient. Now I'm just going to zip these bolts up a tiny bit before we relieve the pressure. And I'm just going to lower the bottle jack. So I'm just going to lower the bottle jack. I need to push some weight on it in order for it to go down. Need to push this down all the way. This is a bottle jack. It's by a Jet, 12.5 ton. Production number 140106. Said it's made in Japan. Usually Japanese stuff is very good quality in the majority of cases, and I don't normally have any problems. So now we're going to get the through bolt. Now we're going to use a pry bar to pry on the control arm to line up the hole. I've already greased this bolt. So we're just going to pry. Trying to get it in. I'm just trying to turn the bolt just to get it on the threads. I just need to wiggle it so I'm able to turn the bolt. Just going to use a wrench to turn it a little bit. I'm not confident using an impact until it's pretty much almost all the way in. So I just like to be sure, because the last thing I want is to have any problems. So this should be okay now. It's going in. So we're going to zip the bolt up to 19. We're going to retighten everything up in the very end after. I'm going to tighten this up. And we'll put the torque spec for these bolts. I think this is 110 foot-pounds. The two in the back 75, and the pinch bolt is 31.8 to 43.3 foot-pound. They have a range for most of these bolts on the Mazdas, so it doesn't have to be exactly on what the torque is, as long as it's within the range. So we're going to snug up the rear bolts now. So now we are just going to get the ball joint stud inside the steering knuckle. You want to make sure that the hole in where the stud goes is clean. So you don't want any dirt inside there. So we're gonna push down on the control arm to move the steering knuckle. You may need to push the steering knuckle inwards in case that the axle popped out, the inboard joint. They call it a plunge joint because it moves in and out. So sometimes you need to push against the caliper towards the transmission so that you can push the axle back into place if you're not able to line up the ball joint. So sometimes the plunge joint or the inboard joint, the CV joint, sometimes it's pushed outward, so you need to push it in. So sometimes you need to push to get the axle back into place in order to line up the ball joint. The ball joint is in the way, that's why. So there, you see the axle, it moved in. So now I'm gonna try to get this in now. Sometimes you may need to push repeatedly to push the inboard joint back into place because it often it pushes out, so you need to push in against against the caliper in order to get that axle in, and now you'll be able to line up the ball joint. Make sure you don't get your fingers caught in between there. You need to push on the ball joint to get it into place. Yeah, now it's in. I just like to use a hammer on the edge of the control arm just to make sure it's in. Make sure it's pushed in all the way. It won't really damage anything. You just need to be careful. Just don't hammer on the ball joint directly, then you're going to ruin the new ball joint. So I'm just making sure it's in all the way, because I've seen in the past where I've fixed other people's mistakes in which the stud was not in all the way. So you have to be careful. So you want to make sure it's all the way in before you install the pinch bolt. Before we install a pinch bolt, I'm gonna put some grease in here to prevent rust and prevent the bolt from seizing up in the future. Now, if the knuckle inside is too rusty, you can use like uh, a bristle brush or some kind of brush that you attach to the drill and clean out the rust inside the steering knuckle. So we're going to install the new pinch bolt. This one is a 10.9 graded bolt. I'm going to insert it all the way in and install the nut. Make sure you're holding the pinch bolt and you are turning the nut. So the torque spec for the pinch bolt is, I believe, 31.8 to 43.3 foot-pounds. You don't need to tighten the pinch bolts uh, all that tight. So I'm probably gonna do between like 35 to 40, and even that's quite a bit. So as long as you are within that range, you should be fine. So you make sure you're holding down on the bolt and you are tightening down the nut. This new pinch bolt has a very small shoulder on it, so it's very hard to get grip onto the pinch bolt. I just tighten it down a tad bit after 35, and that's fine as long as you're within the range. You just need to be careful with these bolts because these bolts are easy to break, so you need to watch out. Just make sure before you tighten the pinch bolt that the stud is all the way out. You can see the tapered part is flush with the steering knuckle, so it sticks out a bit. That's exactly on on what you want. So you gotta make sure it's inserted all the way. Otherwise, you might have some problems in the ball joint going loose. So after you're all done and everything is good, just make sure all the bolts are tightened up. And usually I like to double check the ball joint. I like to pry down on the ball joint just to make sure there's no play and there isn't anything loose. And you should be all good to go. One other thing I like to do after I use the pry bar is to push down on the control arm. Just make sure there's no play and everything is tight, and then you should be all good. So I'm all done. I'm just going to clean the brake rotor in case if I got any grease or dirt on it, and then that's it. I need to throw the wheels on, and then probably have to send the car to an alignment shop afterwards. So once you're done, just make sure you shake the wheel just to make sure there's no play or looseness, and then you should be all good. So the control arm is all done. The passenger side is also done, and so that's it. I'm just going to have to send the vehicle to an alignment shop to have the wheel alignment done, because usually when you do steering and or suspension work, you should do a wheel alignment. And in most cases, when you replace control arms, the steering wheel will be slightly off center. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day and take care.